Hey, Brian, welcome to the show. As a way of getting started, give us a little background on yourself.
Hey, thanks for having me, Brian. I appreciate it. Yeah, I spent 23 years in the high tech industry. I've been in some of the bigger companies like an EMC and an HP and some of those guys, but also then got into software and software startups and cybersecurity. And I even spent about a little over 11 years in the system integrator space. So Foresight and some of those other ones where genuinely not just a VAR, high-end services, building and moving data centers, that kind of stuff. So I had I even was a customer for a little while. I was at US Airways way back in the day as
Wow.
an IT manager. So when I got out of the military, I've had it's been a fun career and I've learned a lot.
Yeah, I like that going from a customer to the vendor side. That's really
Yeah.
powerful. I found that very successful as well as going from like the pre-sales engineer to the sales guy because it
Yeah,
kind
I
of,
was actually one of EMC's first technical account managers, TAMs, they called them way back in the day. And then I went over to the dark side and
yeah.
became an enterprise account executive. And now I'm a recovering software sales executive, is the way I tell people. So
Cool. Hey, you had three major elements of what you feel makes a salesperson great. Would you like to go through those?
that'd be great. Yeah. I spent most of my time in enterprise sales. So the really bigger accounts, right? So I don't have necessarily the best formula for somebody that's just starting out. But for somebody that's been around for a while, I think the first thing is a hunter mentality, even in the large accounts,
Yep.
right? Because some of the biggest accounts are really almost like 10 different accounts, right?
Right.
You
Sure.
got to hit different streams. And if you're handling those kind of accounts, you're juggling different streams in different groups, and you're almost playing traffic cop. I can't tell you how many times I introduce people to people within their own company they never met before, right?
Right.
So I think that hunter mentality, being able to qualify quickly as part of that hunter mentality, and then having some form of good education, whether it's, I know MedPick and command and message is the buzzwords of the day, but it used to be Miller Heiman back in our day, right? It used to be Sandler. It used to be,
Right.
it was I don't really care what it is, as long as you have a methodology that you go through for qualifying, understanding your value versus others. What are the negative consequences? Because one of the biggest things we ran into in software, especially, was do nothing. Your biggest competition was the customer doing nothing. So
Yeah.
so I think that number three, and I'll do them in my opinion of kind of tangibles, like things that that's teachable, like you can train people on that to the points where in my like I said, 23 years, there gets to be certain things that are just intangibles that are really tough to teach. So that was my first one, if you will, if that makes sense.
Yeah, it does. I mean, being proactive when what you call hunting, and I think too many people they get a big account or they get a good pipeline, they kind of react to what's going on and
Yeah.
stick with one person. I'm sure
Yep.
you've seen that,
Absolutely.
right? And if that person flakes or changes their mind or moves on, you're hosed. You haven't gone through the organization. And that
Yep.
one person's opinion, although valuable, is not encompassing of what's going on in that company.
Now, especially if it's a large account, I mean, you're like I said, you're building relationships with multiple streams, multiple groups of people that may not even know each other, and you got to truly understand. The thing I do like about like a med pick or command a message is I do like some of the terminology, like the difference between a coach and a champion, right? And what's an economic buyer, and what do those different things mean? But that moves me into my second bullet, which
Yep.
is and I think this is a lost art. And one of my frustrations, and probably one of the reasons, along with some medical issues, of why I'm kind of leaving this industry is I think the lost art is remembering that this is people. And the best salespeople I've ever met, including, frankly, yours truly, some of my best friends to this day were customers of mine 23 years ago
Yeah.
because they're people, and you treated them like people, and you created real relationships, and you took the time to understand their business and then understand their needs, and then you applied your solution to it with what are the negative consequences, what are the big business problems, what are all those funny terms that we use, but they meant something to you, and you applied it to what they needed in their business and them personally. And I think
Yeah.
that's a huge lost art anymore. We spend 70% of our time talking to each other on forecast. Your videos are hysterical because they're so stinking true, right? So I was that sales manager on those phone calls. I'm like, how many times do I have to tell you the same thing, right? In 5 different areas, you know what I mean? So, and we ended up spending 70% of our time with each other versus with the customers, getting
Yeah.
to know them. So I think that's number 2, and it's a bit of a lost art. I'll argue, though, it's still the second most important attribute that I've seen.
I've seen it too, and I think we're continuing going away from it instead of towards it. I mean, the big emphasis on inside sales, which is economically more effective, but I don't think it's
Customers love it when they're a big customer and you throw them into inside sales to make it
right.
cheaper
But
for them.
it's cheaper, but it's not as effective.
Exactly. It's not.
Because at the end of the quarter, what ends up happening? The VP of sales, the CEO goes and flies out to talk to the people that the inside salespeople have been trying to meet with.
Right. Right. It's
And
ineffective. And again, if you care about building long-term relationships, then you're going to use those people in the field. I mean, I had the cool opportunity to sell in just about every major geographic area in the United States because we moved around, and even I spent a lot of time in Western Canada. And no offense, but there's cultural things here too, right? I mean, you're not gonna sell a certain way into Western Canada, and usually, you want to have Canadian people selling in Canada versus somebody with a different accent, frankly. It's 23 years old calling into an area that they don't know. They don't know the challenges of that geography, right? Some places have hurricanes, some places have other things, whatever it might be, and even the business challenges based on it's a totally different government, right? On
yes,
how totally different regulations, and if you don't know that stuff, you're going to look silly. You know what I mean?
right.
So,
And
and
even
it's like Groundhog Day, Brian. Over and over
yeah,
again, I see companies trying to do this. So,
and even the personalities are different.
right,
Right? Because, I'm half Canadian, so I can say it, but people will smile and agree with you and then just go off and do what they want. And you're
right,
taking that as a positive signal.
yeah,
And this sounds fluffy, but it's really neuroscience. I had an author on my other show talking about this, and that proximity, physical proximity, is one of the elements of trust, meaning that the further you
yeah.
are physically away, even though you might be,
Like, at least buy a second phone. You know what
yeah,
I mean?
or don't bring it
If you're
out.
mobile, I mean, show some respect to the fact that you're again, it's the art of understanding your customer, understanding their business and their personal needs, and then just being relevant and also respectful. To your point, is you don't show up in Nike wearing Converse, right? It's just, it sounds really simple, but you'd be amazed at how many people miss
No one
those
does it.
those
No one
details,
does
and
it.
it matters. It matters.
It does matter. And I think we're trained not to do it. I think we're trained about, what do we do? How does it work? How does it compare against some competitors? And then how much does it cost? We're not
Right.
trained about selling the problem we solve.
And it's a big gap. It really is. And understanding their business first, I think, is the key to that. Because
That's all they care about.
then you apply your solution to their actual problem
Yeah.
versus coming in and just throwing up your solution, and you don't even know if they need it yet.
Yeah.
You don't even know where it applies.
Right. And they're
So,
not going to tell you their problem voluntarily. They're looking at you as a website. Okay, so
yeah,
what do you do? How does it work? How much does it cost? And
yeah,
you want to be a website? Because guess what they do? They go to the next website. If you
exactly.
want to stay engaged with them, you've got to get deep. You got
Absolutely. Hey, I looked at your 10K and I saw on Twitter you guys just acquired a new company where you're going to be ingesting facial recognition. And wow, from a cybersecurity standpoint, what are you guys going to do with that?
yeah,
That's how you start a meeting, right?
yeah.
Not, well, here's what we do.
Our
We
new
do
model.
cyber, and you just go into your song and dance, and their eyes are rolling back in the head, and you're still talking. You know what I mean? Instead of
Yeah,
asking and listening. So, and again, I think it's a lost art, or at least I started to see is the focus from executive management was not honing these type of skills.
right.
Not well. It was, and again, I like MedPick and command and message and those things, but that's all it was. and then forecast and forecast, forecast, forecast. And when's this coming in? And,
Right. That's
and
order administration. That is not sales
exactly.
leadership.
Yeah,
And that's an ops job. That's
it is.
not a sales leadership job.
Yeah. And sales enablement, which I still haven't figured out what the heck that even means, frankly.
Well,
Right.
it's to teach people how to talk about us and what we do.
Right. Well, and see, I like that from like I said, I am a student of like command and message. I did like that where they came in and understand what we did
Yeah.
and then figured out our industry and then figured out what it is that we do that is, differentiators, right? Unique differentiators. And then why is it valuable? Like, is there a big problem? And what is that big business problem? And how are you going to not only solve that, but do it quicker, better, faster, easier?
Yeah.
Easier became, especially in the software world, easier became one of the top buttons, believe it or not, than even functionality.
Of course.
If it's 80% there and it's easy, we'll take that over 100% there and complicate
Right. Yeah. I mean,
it
look
over
at
and over again.
Apple's made the biggest business in the world over easy and just works.
Yep.
Right.
Yep.
It's,
Yeah.
the camera's not as good, this or that. Who cares? It works.
It
Right.
works.
Because
And
I'm
all the
not going to
apps are
get to
integrated.
that
And
level.
yeah, I mean, I always said, if you can marry a great sales company with a great engineering company, you've got Apple back in the day, right?
Yeah.
That's who did it right both ways. So, and then there's one last one and I've spent a long time, and actually the last company I was at, we sat in a room for 2 days. And you guys might all laugh at me, but it took a while to finally get to, but what's truly the number one thing that the top reps that I've ever known have over everybody else? And even I would say myself is I'm not as educated as others. I'm not as, whatever it might be, but it's grit. 4-letter word,
Yeah.
grit. And what grit is the ability to self-motivate, self-drive. It doesn't mean spamming the customer with emails and stuff like that, and you're just relentless. You know what I mean? I mean relentless in a way that you are so well educated on the space that you're in. You're so well educated on your differentiators, and you're so relentless on genuinely making relationships that last and long. And you just have a grit to you that when most people are ready to give up, you're just getting started.
Yeah.
And that's self-driven. No manager is going to drive you and turn you into a gritty person, right?
Not if you don't
It
want to
comes
be.
from life experiences. It comes from, I honestly, I don't know where it comes from, Brian, but you know it when you see it.
Well, I
And you
think,
either have it or
yeah.
you don't.
And
Yeah.
that's been pretty consistent because I think it comes from overcoming adversity
Yeah.
at some point in your life, or having such a desire for something, or the desire for something bad not to happen.
Yeah. Yeah. Yep. Fear is a tough motivator. Believe me, in the military, they use fear a lot and it works.
Right.
So,
Yeah.
yeah.
And military, it's all about that, right? Because what do? They strip away your identity and they put
Yep.
a regiment in,
Yep.
and you know exactly what's good and bad.
Yeah.
There's
Yeah.
no
And
gray
believe me,
area.
you're going to have grit and drive when you're out in the battlefield and it's life or death. And that's where I'm totally biased towards veterans, and everybody knows that. Anybody that knows me knows that. But the reason is because of that grittiness, that ability to overcome crazy adversity and keep driving forward and finding ways in a positive manner to put a team around yourself that understands where you're headed and
Yeah.
follow you. And that's the other thing is most great salespeople have an incredible team around them. They're not doing this alone. It's not
Right.
possible to tackle some of these large enterprise accounts all by yourself, no matter who you are. So,
And I think the military is an excellent background. I had somebody on the show who helps people transition from military into sales.
yeah.
And because teamwork, mission oriented, and coachability is too soft a word for what, what happens.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. Yep.
Because if you have those three things, people, you can learn enthusiasm, you can learn any business problem. Right.
Yep.
I mean, how long can it take for you to be able to build up a half-hour conversation? And you don't even have
Yeah.
to say anything. All you have to do is come up with 10 good questions.
That's exactly right. Is
Right.
understanding their business and apply the questions to their business. Because
Right.
all too often I've seen people will walk in with generic questions, and I'm like, this is a telco. It's not.
Right.
This is not a retail, right? Those are two very different businesses, and you need to understand the difference between, how a media and entertainment company consumes and uses data versus, somebody who just does, over the counter B2C sales, right? It's very, very different. And you
And
need to understand that.
yeah, and like a therapist or a doctor, when you find what they care about, it's like, hold on, put your seatbelt on. You're in for another hour and a half of them telling you what the issues are, and hopefully one of them overlaps with what you do. But
Right.
that's the power of selling.
And I think that's where the great people that I witnessed walked in with somewhat of an agenda, and most of them would even write it down and follow it, like right on the side there, and kind of follow it. But they were able to flex if the customer all of a sudden said, that's not as big of a deal, but I tell you what, that thing you mentioned about the facial recognition, that's a massive problem for us. And then you got to be smart enough and patient enough to shut up and listen and
Why? Why
take
is it such a
notes.
challenge?
Yeah, and also kind of control the people in the room, because sometimes, look, I can say this because I used to be an SE and a TAM. You also got to control those guys from going down into a rat hole
Hole.
of,
Yeah.
oh my gosh, there's the silver bullet. I'm going to jump in. Well, hold on, there might be 3 more silver bullets.
Yeah.
Just listen and just let them tell you everything that's going on. And then you can say, hey, do we have enough time to go through all of these? Or do you want me to focus on what would be the most critical thing of what you just mentioned that would be best for me to spend my time on?
Yeah.
Right. And they'll tell you, because
They
they're
will.
people.
Right.
You know what I mean? And they have emotions, and they're just like you and me, right? And I think if you stay at that people level and you show them that you're a human being too, and you're doing your job. I never apologized for being a salesperson. I loved it. I
Yeah.
loved it, and I loved helping people. And I think, if you see the great ones, they love solving problems. Like, they're genuine, really good Rubik's Cube type solving problems people. Like,
Yeah.
they look at your challenge as their challenge. That's the great ones. And then they
And
build
that's
a
it.
team around them to solve it.
One of the best compliments I usually got in a sales call was, "Are you in sales?" Because I didn't talk
Right,
about the product. I was like,
right.
what are you facing? Getting into the core issues. What do you care about? Because I knew how they were rewarded. They want to work on interesting things. They want it to work. They want their managers out of their way. They want cool new stuff that will enable them to grow their career and have fun during the day.
Yeah, I think one of the best compliments I ever had, Brian, to your point, was a customer asked if I'd be willing to talk to their salespeople. So I was like, yeah, sure, yeah, I can do that, and I think, like, another example to show where you actually care about someone is, I'll use T-Mobile as an example again, is, my company didn't have a single T-Mobile phone at the time. So I went back to my CEO and I said, hey, why don't we show these guys that we genuinely care? And if I can bring the CIO a brand new company that they've never sold into before, and give them a chance to turn us, then gosh, I would think that would carry a lot of weight. And then I'd be tit for tat. Hey, by the way, I just got you a new sale. How about you help me in this area, because we're really good in this area, and let me have a shop there. And lo and behold, that worked really well. Amazing. Why? Because I gave a crap about them, right? And I took the time to say, hey, I want to help you personally look really good in front of your executive management by bringing in, an opportunity that you never had before, right?
Eh,
And it's just thinking that way first.
right, because
So
now that you are a customer of theirs, you're part of the tribe,
that's right.
an extended member, but still part of it.
Hey, I had a badge. I got a badge after that, right? I could, I all of a sudden, and
Then
let me
you
tell
are
you,
the
you need a
tribe,
badge.
right?
Then you're in. If you're a sales guy and you have a badge, then they actually like you.
Yeah, right.
So
You get
yeah,
licensed to roam,
yeah.
right? You're in the cave.
Well, you're considered valuable, I think, is what it really comes down to. Is they
Yeah.
see you less as, they know you sell. I mean, because like I said, I've never apologized for that. But they also know that you actually bring value and seem to care about them, and that's why you have a badge. So
Now, when you were hiring reps, what did you look for
and I would do it in reverse. Frankly, I would look for grit and
first?
that ability. So I think one of the greatest compliments you can get is that a customer leaves and goes to another customer, and you're right back in there, then you know you had genuine relationships. So I'll weed through, and sometimes even question. I'm like, okay, well, you know this account really well. Well, who do you know there really well? And then I'll back channel, right? Just to see, if they really do have that level of relationships. Because at the end of the day, your ability to hunt on your own, your ability to develop more relationships or bring relationships with you, and of course, to be an enterprise sales, you've got to have some kind of a med pick or TAS or some kind of a methodology that you have adopted that works for you. I
Right.
more want to see that you have one, not necessarily that what it is, right?
Right.
Meaning, I can teach you the new nomenclature of MedPick versus TAS or Miller Hyman versus whatever, right? But what I don't have time to do in enterprise sales is teach you a methodology, right? That takes a long time, right?
And that's
And
just the cookbook. It's the cooking
right.
of the book. How.
And again, I can teach you what we do.
Yeah.
That's teachable, right? I can even teach you how to look at, hey, you really should adopt the idea. It's a little bit of a gap I see in you is the difference between a coach and a champion. Let's work on that. But again, those are things you can work on. What I've learned is I look at getting to know the person, back channeling on the person.
Yeah.
Like, what do they do? Who are they really? And do they have that grit? Are they self-motivated? Are they coachable to where if I see something in their blind spot, they don't tell me to, pound sand or that I'm a jerk. They realize that, hey, that's a way for me to get better.
Yeah.
And he's trying to help me, right?
Yeah.
Or she's trying to help me. So anyways, I think when I'm looking and when I brought a lot of the salespeople over that did the best for me was one, they usually worked for me before, but if it was brand new, that's what I was looking for. I was looking for, what relationships do you genuinely have? Do you have a methodology that you followed and have been successful at it? And do you have the grit to grind it out day after day after day? Because it can be a grind in what we do.
It is,
It is. So
because even when it's good, it's only good for a quarter, right?
right.
It starts over.
You still flip back to zero on January 1st or
Right.
whatever your
Yeah, you get the
fiscal is.
handicap.
You're still a loser. It's funny. My wife would always say is, these club trips that we'd all go on, and like, how many times do you guys have to tell each other you're amazing? You know, you know,
Every
before you
day.
guys flip over and now you're a loser again, January 1st, right? It's
Right.
back to zero, right?
What other career does that?
Yeah, right.
Right. You're a ball player. Next season, they don't start you over at 1 million. You're still at
Right.
15 million, right?
That's right. That's right. It is.
Sales is
It
the
is a
only
very
thing.
difficult job, and that's why I look for that grit more than
Yeah.
anything. Because you've got to be able, especially if you're playing at the enterprise level, you're against the best of the best,
Yeah.
right? So your game is going to have to be better than people that the other guys are hiring or other gals are hiring that are their best, right? So you have to have that grit above and beyond everything else, beyond education, beyond because more and more I notice that, no offense to a college education, a master's degree, that's all great, but I will tell you, I would take somebody who's gritty and has relationships and has at least some kind of methodology over any degree all day
Yes.
long.
All the time, right?
All the
Because,
time.
yeah. And what do you see on a resume without talking to somebody? What do you look for in grit? Evidence? Is it
I'm
military?
looking for that experience. I'm looking for some level of longevity at least somewhere where
Yeah.
you see somebody that's bounced around. Look, bouncing around in the software world is not unusual, right? You're there
Not at
2 or 3
all.
years. That's normal,
It's
right?
normal.
But if you bounced around 6, 7 times with only a year,
Yeah.
it almost
That's a
looks
red
like you
flag.
got past your draw and then you weren't making any money, and so you left before they fired you or you got fired. So I'm
Right.
looking for the stuff like that, patterns, if you will. Have you been to a bigger company where you've probably been trained really well? Like, back in the early days at EMC, you can say what you want about that company. When I was there, they were phenomenal, unbelievable
It was a
company.
machine.
And
Yeah.
we were a machine and we were trained really well. And it wasn't just theoretical. It was bringing in, Mr. Hyman, and we're gonna have and bring in 6 CIOs, and we're gonna see how you do. Right? It was hard. Don't get me wrong.
Yeah.
But so I'm also looking for, do you have some level of fundamental training where you understand sales process and and what forecasting is? You don't forecast on hope. You're actually you're
On
honest with the guy in
requirement.
the mirror or the girl in the mirror. Yeah.
On
So
quota. Yeah.
right. Yeah. So I do look for that stuff. And then I do look for ancillary stuff. Like, what do you do in your spare time? Who are you as a human
Human
being?
being.
Right.
Yeah.
And a lot of times you can't necessarily find it in the resume, but I'll dig it out in an interview. Right. And that'll be, I have a series of questions I've always used when I'm hiring people. And the ones that I hold more weight on that people probably never knew was the ones that were a little bit more personal, because I'm trying to figure out what makes you tick. I'm
Right.
trying to figure out, are you self-motivated? Do you have that grit? Are you coachable? Are you potentially, a poison to the company because you might be good, but you burn the place down around you, right?
Yeah.
So I'm looking for those kind of things. Is, do you fit into a team environment? Are you a team player? And can you even maybe be a leader for me to help some of the people that are up and coming?
Yeah.
Is what I'm constantly looking for. If that makes sense.
And have you ever seen an A player that didn't have that grit?
No,
No.
not one.
Right. And that's
That's why
it.
I go back to it every time. I'm like, the other stuff is potentially coachable. It's the intangibles that are really different. I can't coach a bad person. I can't coach somebody who's mean, or somebody who doesn't give a crap about people. Right?
Yeah.
That's really tough to change that. Like you said, that neuroscience. I can't crawl inside your head and rewire you.
Only
Right?
they can do it. You can
Only
point it
they
out.
can.
You can teach them how, but
Yeah.
they have to do
But
it.
that's a lot of time and effort. And when I was managing 8 to 10 people at any given time. To spend that much time trying to rewire someone's brain, it's not effective, right?
Yeah.
So that's why I go back to that over and over again. I'm like, look, the tangibles are teachable, but you being a good person or having the ability to lead a team and give a crap about the customer, build real relationships, understand their business, and then have that grit to grind it out day in and day out. That's tough to teach, Brian. It's really
It
tough.
is very hard.
So,
Hey, this has been a great conversation. Where can people go to connect with you and follow you?
I'm on LinkedIn right now. I still have, like I said, I'm doing a little bit of a different thing now. I'm running a nonprofit that's near and dear to my heart where we bless veterans. My wife and I are both veterans. But I am going to be looking to do a podcast here come this summer with my daughter. And its title is the most bat crazy things that ever happened in sales tech history. And with my daughter commentating, we've done it a couple of times. It's pretty stinking funny. And it's like it's real stories, right? It's true stories of 23 years. And I'm going to have guests that come on that are, CIOs and CFOs and tell their side of the story too. But, so, look for that coming this summer, but for right now, you can follow me on LinkedIn and check me out there and see what I'm doing with the Home with Heroes. But stay tuned for me and my daughter to be on camera and try to be as cool as what you're doing. So.